All right, guys. So in our previous video, we talked about the first two operations with polynomials, which were addition and subtraction. Today, we're going to talk about the next two, which are all about multiplication and division. So when you're multiplying a polynomial, we're going to look particular at multiplying a polynomial and a monomial, meaning that one of the two is just going to be a single term. When that's the case, all we do is distribute that one term to everything that's inside the parentheses. So let's take a look at how this works. So in this first example, we've got 5x multiplied by parentheses 2x plus 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this 5x and we're going to distribute it to both the 2x and the 3. So when you take 5x and multiply by 2x, 5 multiplied by 2 is 10, and then x multiplied by itself is x squared. Next, when you take 5x and multiply by 3, you get 5 multiplied by 3, which is 15, and then x has nothing to multiply with, so it just stays as x. And that's all there is to it. Let's take a look at another example. So in the next example, we've got negative 2b multiplied by, in parentheses, 5b squared plus b plus 6. So, same idea. We're going to take this negative 2b, and we're going to multiply it by everything that's inside the parentheses. So you take negative 2b and multiply by 5b squared. First multiply the numbers in front, so negative 2 multiplied by 5 is negative 10. And then b multiplied by b squared, now you've got b to the power of 3. Next, when you take negative 2b and multiply by b, you'll get negative 2, and then b multiplied by b is b squared. Finally, when you take negative 2b and multiply by 6, negative 2 multiplied by 6 is negative 12, and b has nothing to multiply with, so it just stays as b. Okay, let's take a look at a few more examples just to make sure that this all makes sense. So in the next one, we've got 5x squared multiplied by, in parentheses, negative 2x plus 4y. So starting off with, we're going to distribute the 5x squared to both terms. For the first term, if we take 5 multiplied by negative 2, that's negative 10. And then x squared multiplied by x is x to the power of 3. Next, when you take 5x squared and multiply by 4y, 5 multiplied by 4 is 20. X squared and y you can't combine together, so you just have to write them both down as x squared multiplied by y. Okay, two more examples of multiplication, and then we'll take a look at division. All right, so we're distributing 4y squared to each of these terms inside the parentheses. So we're going to start with our first term. 4 multiplied by 5 is 20. X has nothing to multiply with, so we'll just copy that down as x. But then y squared multiplied by y to the fourth. Remember, this is where those rules of exponents that we talked about in last unit come into play. 2 and 4 we add together to be y to the power of 6. For our next term, we're going to take 4 multiplied by negative 3 is negative 12. And then y squared and x squared, nothing to combine with. So we just copy both of those down as x squared, y squared. Finally, for our last term, we take 4 multiplied by 2 is 8. And y squared multiplied by y is going to be y to the power of 3. Okay, let's take a look at one last multiplication, and then we'll talk about division. So we've got 7a multiplied by, in parentheses, 3ab squared minus 8ab minus 1. So we're going to take 7a and distribute it to each of the terms. So 7 multiplied by 3 is 21. A multiplied by a is a squared. And then the b squared stays as it is. Next, we're going to take 7 multiplied by negative 8 is negative 56. A multiplied by a is a squared, and then the b you just copy down. Finally, taking 7a multiplying by negative 1, that's just negative 7a. All right, so that's it for multiplication. We will do a little bit more with multiplication in our next video, But for right now, that's really all we need to know. Let's go ahead and take a look at division then. And really division is kind of the same, but going backwards. So when you're dividing polynomials by a monomial, you divide every single term in a numerator by the monomial that's in your denominator. So let's take a look at some examples. These first two are going to be pretty easy. The others we'll have to do a little bit more work for. So we've got 4x squared over x to the first. Think back to what we did with our exponents. Where do we have more x's, top or bottom? Definitely have more on top of our fraction. And we've got one more on top, so we'll leave an x in our numerator. We also had a 4 in our numerator, and that leaves us with nothing in our denominator, which is okay. Our answer is just 4x. For our next example, we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to look for where do we have more of y. We definitely have more y on top than bottom of our fraction. We have 5 on top, 3 on bottom, so that leaves us with 2 more on top when we simplify. Also, 25 divided by 5, it's just 5, and that leaves us with nothing in our denominator once again, which is okay. Our answer is just going to be 5y squared. For the next example, here's where things get a little bit trickier. We've got 12a to the fourth minus 6a to the third plus 2a squared all over 2a squared. First thing we're going to want to do is rewrite this all as fractions over 2a squared. When we do that, we're going to separate those. We're going to have a minus sign there, then the 6a cubed over 2a squared, and then plus, and then 2a squared over 2a squared. So basically, you're just taking everything in your numerator and separating it, putting it all over the same thing from your denominator. And now it's really kind of just 3 problems in one. You're just simplifying each of those different fractions separately. So for the first fraction, we look for where do we have more a, top or bottom. Definitely have more on top. We have 4 on top, 2 on bottom, so that leaves us with a squared. And then 12 divided by 2 is 6. For our second fraction, we're going to do the same thing. Where do we have more a, top or bottom? We have 1 more on top than on bottom. And then 6 divided by 2 is 3. So that would just be 3a. The last fraction is actually pretty easy to simplify. Notice that it's the exact same in top and bottom, 2a squared over 2a squared. So that'll simplify to just be 1. And then there it is. There's our answer. We're going to do a couple more kind of like that, just to make sure that that makes sense. Really, as you can see, they're not a whole lot different than the first 2 examples we looked at, just that extra step at the beginning. All right, so same idea in this next one, even though there's more variables to go, we're going to still copy it down. So our first term, 6a cubed b squared, all over a squared b, minus 2a squared b, all over a squared b. Okay, so let's go ahead and simplify this first fraction. Let's go variable by variable. We have a cubed over a squared. That's 1 more a on top. We also have b squared over b. That's also 1 more b on top. And the 6, we don't have to do anything with that to simplify. So the first fraction just becomes 6ab. For our second fraction, notice that we have the same amount of a squared on both top and bottom, so that's just going to cancel. Same with b, same amount on top and on bottom. And so that leaves us with just the 2. And so there it is, our final answer. So even though this problem probably looked very hard at first, you can see that really they're pretty easy. All right, let's take a look at one last example, and we'll be done with division. So same idea. Even though there's a lot going on, let's go ahead and first separate everything in our numerator. So we're going to take that over 4a squared b to the third plus, and then our second fraction is going to be 12a to the third b to the fourth all over 4a squared b cubed. And then finally our last fraction is going to be the 4a to the sixth b to the third all over 4a squared b to the third. Okay, once we've done that, again, we're just going to go fraction by fraction. In our first fraction, same amount of a's in both top and bottom, so those are just going to cancel. For b, we have 2 more on top than bottom, so that's going to be b squared. And then negative 16 divided by 4 is going to be negative 4. For our second fraction, we have 1 more a on top than bottom, so that's going to be a to the first. Same with b, 1 more on top than bottom, so that's just going to be b. As for the numbers, 12 divided by 4 is just 3. Finally, for our last fraction, we have 6 a's on top, 2 on bottom. That's 4 more on top than on bottom, so that's going to be a to the power of 4. For b, we have the same amount in both top and bottom, so we're going to be able to cancel those out. And then 4 divided by 4 is 1. So actually, that was it. Here's our final answer. All right, guys, that is it for this section of the notes. In the next section, we'll be talking about how to multiply polynomials when they're not just a monomial. So we'll talk more about that in that video. Until then, have a good rest of your day.